Hello everyone. Today we will talk about the construction of partition walls. The partition wall does not play a load-bearing role, but only divides the interior of the building into different spaces. Although partition walls are not the main structure of a building, they have a significant impact on its use. In order to divide the space, the position of the partition wall is relatively flexible. They generally don't be stringed together and overlap in position like a load-bearing wall. Partition walls usually rely on load-bearing walls or floor slabs for support. Therefore, lightweight is the first requirement that partition walls should meet. Secondly, in order to increase the effective usable area indoors, while meeting stable other functional requirements, the thickness of the partition wall should be as thin as possible. The partition wall should also have good sound insulation and equivalent fire resistance. For damp and wet rooms, the partition wall should have good moisture-proof and waterproof performance during the use of buildings. Due to the possibility of adjusting and redefining indoor spaces, partition walls should have good assembly functions to minimize wet work and improve construction efficiency. There are various types of partition walls. Here we introduce the construction of three common types of partition walls: masonry partition walls, reinforced partition walls, and slab partition walls. There are two types of masonry partition walls: brick partition walls and block partition walls. Brick partition wall is a widely used type of partition wall. In ordinary civil architecture, brick partition walls are mostly constructed with common bricks, divided into two types: quarter brick thickness and half brick thickness, with half brick partition walls being the main type. Half brick partition wall, also known as half brick partition wall, has a marking size of 120 millimeters, and the mortar used for wall construction should not be lower than M5. Due to the thin thickness of the partition wall, in order to ensure the stability of the wall, the length and height of the wall should be controlled. When the length of the wall exceeds 5 m, or the height exceeds 3 m, reinforcement measures should be taken. The specific method is to consolidate the partition wall with the load-bearing walls or columns at both ends, and at the same time, two full-length tie bars should be installed every 500 to 800 millimeters inside the wall. Due to structural requirements, half-brick partition walls are generally not allowed to be directly built on the floor slab, but must be supported by load-bearing beams. Setting load-bearing beams increases the variety of building components, making construction more complicated. Sometimes, load-bearing beams can also damage the overall effect of the ceiling space in the room below. Using lightweight blocks to build partition walls allows for direct placement on the floor slab, without the need for load-bearing beams. At present, the commonly used building blocks include slag concrete blocks, ceramic aggregate concrete blocks, and aerated concrete blocks. Due to the poor waterproof and moisture-proof ability of aerated concrete, it should be used with caution in humid environments, or treated with moisture-proof measures on the surface. Reinforced partition walls are generally made of wood and thin-walled steel as the skeleton, and covered with plastering with gray boards, steel wire mesh, paper-faced plaster boards, sound-absorbing boards, or other decorative panels. This type of partition wall has the characteristics of lightweight, small footprint, and convenient decoration, and is widely used in buildings. We will introduce the construction of this type of partition wall using a light steel skeleton partition wall. The light steel skeleton consists of upper and lower sills, horizontal and vertical keels. The thin-walled steel for assembling the skeleton is a standardized product produced by the factory, equipped with various connecting components. required for assembly. The spacing between vertical keels should not exceed 600 mm, and the spacing between horizontal keels should not exceed 1,500 mm. When the height of the wall is above 4 m, it should also be appropriately increased. The most commonly used panel material is plasterboard. The plasterboard is connected to the keel with self-tapping screws, with a spacing of about 200 mm between the nails. The nail cap should be pressed into the board by about 2 mm, and the surface of the plasterboard can be decorated, such as spraying paint, painting, pasting wallpaper, and so on, to avoid cracking. A 50 mm wide fiberglass tape should be added to the slab joint. Plasterboard partition walls can basically meet the sound insulation requirements of general rooms. If the room has high requirements for sound insulation, sound-absorbing rock wall can be filled between the keels. The installation process of reinforced partition walls is to first install the upper and lower sills, then install the longitudinal bars, and finally install the panels. Now introduce the structure of the slat partition walls. Slat partition wall is a wall made of lightweight boards produced by manufacturers and assembled on site. This type of partition wall has good assembly, fast construction speed, and good fire resistance, but the price is relatively high. Currently, there are many materials and types of slat partition walls, such as plasterboard, cement glass fiber hollow strip board, etc. It does not require internal skeleton support during installation. For example, aerated concrete slabs are fixed on the base above the partition wall with cementing agent, or filled with fine aggregate concrete joints, without the need for compacting, and without becoming load-bearing walls. Rooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and other wall panels with water should be elevated with fine aggregate concrete for at least 100 mm. In addition, here is a type of movable partition wall inside the partition wall, which is characterized by incomplete separation of space, mainly serving as a partial obstruction or organizing traffic routes. The common forms of movable partition walls include assembly, sliding, folding, suspension, rolling shutter, and lifting. The production process of its main body can refer to the method of door leaf, and its movement is mostly controlled and implemented by two upper and lower tracks or a single upper track. In this lecture, we mainly introduce the characteristics of partition walls and the construction of several common partition walls. With the development of the construction industry, many new forms and characteristics of partition walls have emerged. That's all for this lecture about the construction of partition walls. Thank you.